Okay, so our final segment, we're going to talk about altruism, which is defined as the unselfish regard for the welfare of other people. Some people very stringently define altruism as, looking out for somebody else, even sometimes to your own detriment. So they hold up like the guy who throws himself on a grenade to save his platoon. But altruism also can take much subtler forms, like you've got a full cart at the grocery store, a week's worth of groceries, and there's somebody behind you who only has a gallon of milk, and so you let them go first. Things like that. That's also altruistic. Now, when do we behave altruistically? When are we likely to help? Well, research into bystander intervention has shown that we don't always jump in and help when we know or we perceive someone to be in danger or needing of help. What we've realized is that there's like a decision tree that people go through when deciding whether to help or not. So here's our little decision tree. First off is the attention level, where did you even notice that the thing happened? Here we have a picture of a guy laying on the street. This is from a study by Darley and Latane, who had a guy lay on the street and moan, and people basically just walked by and didn't help. And this outrages people when you see that kind of thing, where people are just walking by and not helping somebody who is moaning or is having a seizure or something like that. A lot of times we can let people off the hook at the level of they didn't notice. If you didn't notice, obviously you're not going to help. But I think we can agree these girls who are walking by see the guy on the ground. They're looking at him, right? So the next level is the appraisal level. Did you interpret it as an emergency? The fact that they're walking past kind of implies they're not, right? They don't interpret it as an emergency. One of the problems of being in a group, is there's 4 at least people in that group, is that we start to do that little social conformity thing. If my group mate seems to think that it's fine and they keep walking, then I should conform and I should keep walking, right? Maybe that person that I'm with realizes that the person on the ground is fine, and I'll just go with my friend's judgment and I won't look any closer. A lot of times when bystanders are interviewed later and they're asked, why didn't you do something? They're like, well, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I really didn't know what to make of what I was seeing, so I figured maybe he was just a drunk that was passed out and I didn't want to embarrass him or whatever. And so they didn't know what they were seeing, and so they assumed it must not be an emergency. Now let's assume that these kids who are walking by this guy see it. They interpret it as an emergency. Now they have to decide, am I the appropriate person to intervene? Is it my role to step in and assume responsibility? And for a lot of people, they'll come to the conclusion of no. They'll be like, all these people are standing around and seeing this guy on the ground. How am I the one person who's the most qualified to help him out? I have no idea what to do. There's this one video that I show in my social psychology class where the bystander is not helping this guy who's on the ground, but they are talking on their cell phone and they're pacing back and forth. Now, I have no idea who the witness is talking to on the cell phone, but it's possible they were calling the authorities. A lot of times when a person sees something happening out in public and they realize, I don't think I'm the proper person to be responsible for helping, like doing something for the person, but I can at least be responsible for calling and trying to get, authorities out here who might know what to do. I'd like to point out that that's taking action. If you call for help, you've taken action. You know what I mean? You've let somebody who maybe is better equipped to handle the situation know that the situation's occurring and that that somebody needs help. Not all of us have had CPR training, and we aren't sure what to say or do to help somebody who might be laying on the street. So a lot of times our action may take the form of, just calling for help, and that's perfectly fine. Calling for help is a huge help. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about why people are reluctant to help and why we second guess ourselves in these kinds of emergency situations. So when I was living in Albuquerque working on my PhD, we had a neighbor that backed up to us, and she was a little and I mean little lady, little old lady. She was in her 80s. She was maybe 4'9". I mean, she's this tiny little lady. And I would see her over the back fence. She'd be hanging up her laundry, and I'd be out there weeding my garden or whatever. And she had a little dog who could only walk on 3 of his legs because he was so old and stuff. And her name was Rose, and we would chit chat, but that's all I knew. She knew my name was Jill, I knew her name was Rose, and we'd talk over the back fence. So I hadn't seen Rose in a little while because it was winter time, and so we hadn't been in the backyard. And one night I was getting ready for bed, and out of the corner of my eye I saw like a light movement. It was dark. I was getting ready for bed, so I saw light. So I looked out my bedroom window and across the backyard, and there in Rose's house, I could see a flashlight moving around in her house. All the lights are off, and there's a flashlight in there. So I was like, oh, she's being burglarized. Well, right off. So I noticed the incident, right? Did I interpret it as an emergency? My first thought was, it looks like she's being burglarized. But of course, I wasn't really sure. So I called my husband in, and I'm like, okay, I saw a flashlight in there. It's gone now. Maybe there it is again, right? So he saw it too. So both of us were like, okay, yeah, that looks like she's being burglarized. Okay, so I called the police, and he went out front because we didn't even know the name of the street that her house faced. This was in the old days when you couldn't Google stuff. So I called the police. He waited for him in the front yard, hopped in the car with them, and he got to go with the police officer over to the front of Rose's house. The police officer walked around the house and, well, first he knocked on the front, no. He walked around the house and shined his flashlight through her windows looking for any evidence of burglary or a person in there or anything. He didn't see anybody in there. He didn't see any evidence of things being out of place. So he went to the front door and he knocked, and nobody answered the door. So he goes over to the neighbor's house and asks, do you know your neighbor's phone number? Well, luckily, the next door neighbor knew Rose's phone number and called. Rose answers the phone and goes, there's someone trying to break into my house. They've been shining lights in my window and pounding on my front door. And the neighbor's like, it's okay. It's the police department. Just let them in. Oh my gosh. When I found out, Rose told the police officer that she used a flashlight when she went to the bathroom so she wouldn't get, night blind and have to turn off her light and climb in bed and stuff. Oh my God, I was so embarrassed and I was so appalled that I had scared her so badly by sending the police over there, right? So the next day I went over there with a plate of cookies and said, how sorry I was that I overreacted like that. And, she was completely grateful. She was like, thank you so much, honey. I had no idea you were looking out for us so well, and I really appreciate it. And she was really nice about it. But I was so embarrassed, and I was so upset that I might have, made her scared sitting in her house. And I think that's where things oftentimes break down. Right off, I wasn't sure if what I was seeing was really an emergency, so I got a second opinion on it. We did feel like we're the only people who possibly could have seen this, so we felt responsible for it. And so I attempted to help. But I shouldn't have called the police, obviously, because it was her. And that's the thing, that we oftentimes don't know what to make of what we're seeing. And so when you see a news report and it looks like the bystanders seem to not care that something's happening, they just walk right by, think about the fact that they might be processing it and trying to figure out what exactly they're seeing. What should I do? Is this an emergency, right? And that's oftentimes you'll realize that that's exactly what their little brain was doing, was trying to make sense of what they were experiencing. So what I've kind of been describing is something called the bystander effect, that when there are a lot of people around, each individual is less likely to help. Fewer people will help when there are actually other people around. There's a little video that you can watch if you want to launch this link, and it shows an example of a person needing help and nobody seeming to help. And it kind of illustrates the concept and talks about why. And it has to do a lot with conformity and things like that. So why? Well, the diffusion of responsibility. When there's a group, why would I be the most competent person to help, right? I mean, how did I get nominated to be the one who knows what to do, right? What they found is that as the number of others who presumably could help increase, the likelihood of any individual actually helping goes down. From, if you're alone, if you're the only person there, almost 90% of people will help. If there are 4 other people there, so there's a total of 5 people observing, you're one, and then there's 4 others, any individual has like a 30% chance of actually helping out. We start to think everybody else is standing around, I don't know what to do, whereas when you're the only one there, you may not know what to do, but you realize I'm your only hope, and so you're more likely to jump in. Conformity. If everybody else is standing around, it's going to take a lot of nerve on your part to actually buck that system and pitch in and do something. So going along and doing what everybody else is doing. We oftentimes rationalize inaction. Like I might, if I see an emergency today, might say to myself, I might be misinterpreting it like I did with Rose, right? And that kind of rationalization allows us to say, oh, I'm sure it's fine, and then just keep moving on. And so we don't help. One of the things about conformity and that rationalization kind of comes together, and we look around, we see nobody else is helping. Maybe they all know that this guy's faking it, or maybe they all know that he's a dangerous person, and so I'd be foolish to jump in like Superman and take care of it myself, right? So we rationalize like that. Now, that's all pretty negative, so let's talk about what factors might increase the probability that we'll help. We are most likely to help when there are some characteristics of the person that makes it more likely that we will help them. If they appear to be in need and deserving of our help, so they're in this condition through no fault of their own, we're more likely to help them out. If they're a woman, we're more likely to help them. Sorry, men. If they are someone like us, we're more likely to help them. And if we're in a small town or a rural area, we're more likely to help. And that might be in part because we realize the probability of somebody else coming along to help is lower. We broke down, needed to change our tire on our trailer in the middle of nowhere in Montana. And I swear within 10 minutes of pulling over to the side of the road, a guy pulled over with his wife in the car and proceeded to pull the correct kind of jack out of his truck and help us replace our tire. He could have so easily just driven by, because we're certainly not his problem, a couple of people on, a family on vacation, but he realized in this small town, in this rural area, we could have been there by ourselves for a really long time struggling with our inappropriately small jack. So, now, characteristics of us that make us more likely to help. If we're feeling guilty, we're more likely to help. If we've just recently witnessed someone else helping, we're more likely to help. If we're not in a hurry, and if we're in a good mood. People who are in a good mood are more likely to do all sorts of beneficial, friendly, and good behaviors. So, so there are certain kinds of people we're more likely to help, and certain times when for us we're more likely to help. All right, well, that's enough on social psychology. So I apologize for some of the long lectures there in the middle, but all right, we'll move on to psychological disorders in the next chapter.